What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So you're on Facebook Marketplace, you're on OfferUp, you see a T5 transmission for sale. You know, the description says runs great, just pulled it out, just got it rebuilt, it's in great condition. So you say, oh, perfect, you grab the money, you got the cash, you're underway, you meet the seller, then you're looking at something that you have no idea what you're looking at. So instead of just taking the seller's word for it, because let's be honest, there's people out there that just try to screw you, which is not cool. They kind of ruin it for everybody else. But I'm going to go over a few tips and a few things to look for when you're purchasing a T5 transmission, whether it's used or claimed to be rebuilt, and as well as how to identify the transmission just by looking at it. So let's get into it. This transmission just got dropped off. I just cleaned it up the other day. It's going to get my Pro Street 295 Z-Spec ratio gear set. It's going to get every upgrade available for the T5. I'm going to cover most of the build. I'll probably make this video in two parts, so the next part's going to be the rebuild, tearing down. So hopefully you'll get something out of it. It'll be pretty cool. You can see what goes into it and how everything works. If you've never seen the inside of a T5, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool to see what's inside, so stay tuned for that. There is really only two ways to know if the transmission is good. One way is to throw it in your Mustang and send it down the road, and you'll find out real quick if it's good or bad. The second way, which I recommend, is to take it apart. Other than those two ways, visually, we can start with the tag. One of the big things that'll identify this transmission, if you don't even have no idea what you're looking at, is this tag. So you want to look at the 13-52-169. So there is a website that is pretty cool. They lay out every T5 that was made, and they'll tell you the year, car, make and model that it came in, as well as the gear ratio that's inside the trans. So when I look up this number, 1352-169, it tells me it's a 1986 Mustang or Capri with a 5.0 V8, and it has a 335 ratio gear set with a 0.68 overdrive. So I'll leave that down in the description. It's super cool. I love that website. It's britishv8.org. Go check it out for yourself. Other than that, there's a few things you can look for on the transmission to get you an idea of its condition. So the first thing, you can come to the front here. You can check out the bearing retainer. Now this will give you an idea of how many miles are on the transmission. So if you see a big mark and some grooves on the bearing retainer, then that'll kind of tell you that it has some high miles on it. Now if you look closely here, you can see there's a groove. That's from the throwout bearing sliding back and forth when you push in the clutch. So that has some pretty good wear on it. I would not reuse this because I can just feel with my finger that there's a nice valley right there. Very hard to see on camera, but there's a nice divot right here. This is bound to happen. I mean, you got steel on aluminum, so the steel's going to win every time. You can also look at the tip of the input shaft. So this sits in the crankshaft of the engine, and there's a pilot bearing there. So this kind of rides inside there. This is actually pretty good shape. I've seen way worse, a lot of pitting. I think people don't change that bearing when they do a clutch or they get their transmission service. It's always good to replace that bearing. What you can also do with the input is move it around and see how much play it has. That has a little bit of play, but I wouldn't say that's necessarily bad. I felt a lot worse where this thing's just so sloppy and there's a lot of end play in the main shaft and the input. So that's not a bad sign. So hopefully they have a shifter installed. Just make sure that it's in neutral. Another way you can confirm that it's in neutral is you come over the input. This should spin independently than the output shaft. Now, I don't have 3 hands, so it's going to spin a little bit, but what I can do is put a drive shaft yoke in there to try to give it a little weight, so hopefully it won't spin. So there you go. I'm spinning the input, and that is independent from one another, which is good. So basically what that tells you is that the transmission has a true neutral and it's not stuck in gear. Now if you were to put the shifter in neutral and I spun this and this was just spinning and spinning, even if you held it with your other hand and it would continue to go, that means that it's locked in gear. If it was stuck in gear, that means you have a big problem and the transmission is going to have to come apart to fix that. The first thing I like to do is I'll take one hand, I'll put it on the input, and I'll take my other hand and put it on the output shaft, and I'll push my hands together back and forth to check how much end play there is in the main shaft. So the more end play you have, the more worn out the transmission's going to be. What you're shooting for is little to no end play. If this thing, you hear it knocking back and forth, it's severely worn out and it has a lot of miles on it. So there's 2 different types of T5s. If you don't know, there's the NonWorld Class, which is what they debuted as. It's a weaker style transmission. The actual main shaft is stronger than a World Class, but the gears and internals themselves are very weak. I don't even think it's rated for 200 horsepower. I think it's around 175 if I remember, but I don't even mess with NonWorld Class because I don't even think it's worth spending any money on it. So to tell the difference between a World Class and a non-World Class, so the World Class has this Torx head style bolt. The non-World Class has a hex style bolt, like this. It'll look like that on it. Stay away from the non-World Class. I see this all the time. So Ford put these T5s in V6 Mustangs from, I believe, 94 to 2004, even up through the S197s. They have a different version of the T5. It has a very tiny tail housing and it looks kind of funky. But what I'll see on Marketplace, if I'm looking for a T5, they'll pull a T5 out of a V6 Mustang and they'll advertise it as a T5 for a foxbody. They are very similar except for the tail housing. So if you see the speedometer here, all the early T5s, this is a gear on gear driven speedometer. So there's a plastic gear on the main shaft and there's a plastic gear on the speedo. I think after 98, they changed the speedometer to an electronic style, which I actually have one right here. Now you can visually see, other than the speedometer, they're almost identical. One says Tremec because this is a newer style, and Tremec bought out Borg Warner. So you can go ahead, if somebody's advertising a foxbody transmission and it has this tail housing on it with this speedometer, you can see the difference in the location. That would be here and it's not. You're going to go ahead and put this in your Mustang and you're going to realize that you got no speedo because they're completely different style speedometers. I've seen this happen. I've actually worked on a few cars. Like, yeah, my speedometer doesn't work. I'm like, well, you have the wrong tail housing on your T5. It's never going to work. So that is something to look out for. This style tail housing can be used on a classic Mustang if you're upgrading the gauge cluster and it accepts an electronic speedometer. There's a way to wire that up, but as far as a foxbody, this will not work. I just went ahead and spun this around. Just wanted to show you the fill hole and the drain hole. So what you want to look for with this drain plug, I see this more often than I like, which kind of sucks because you'll spend a few hours cleaning this case, the whole transmission, and then you'll realize that there's a crack all the way down the case. Now people over tighten this drain plug to the point where it splits the case. In order to fix the crack, you'd have to weld it. So that includes finding out where the crack stops, grinding the case pretty much all the way through, and then filling that with some weld. So if you don't know how to TIG aluminum, you're going to have to find somebody who knows how to. There's really no need to over tighten it. If you're worried about it leaking, over tightening it isn't going to do anything. Put some Teflon tape around it or some Permatex high temp sealant. I love this stuff. That's something to look for. It might be hard to notice that because like I said before, most of the time these cases are filthy. That's why cleaning and inspecting is very important. You want to make sure that the transmission has the right oil in it. Bring a 3/8 ratchet with you, take off that drain plug, and make sure that it has ATF in it. If it does not, then you're looking at some new synchros for sure. I've even seen people put engine oil in a T5.
What are you feeling, Lance? 40 weight? 50 weight?
40 weight sounds nice.
So please, if it's a World Class T5, guys, put ATF fluid in it. And do not put gear oil or engine oil in a T5 World Class. I see that so often, and people wonder why they have problems with their transmission. So please, ATF. I write it every time on the top case. I'll write a note. 3 quarts, Dextron 3, automatic transmission fluid. Do not use gear oil. Just want to make that super clear. Because we got a nice blue B&M short shifter. Not my preference shifter, but it's got the same idea of a short shifter. So the stock shifters don't have these stops built into them. Let me try to get some better light on here. So when you're driving down the 405 and you're 5.0 with all its 225 horsepower, and you see that Challenger looking like a boat asking you for some of the sauce, and you downshift in the second, and once you're ready to bang third, you rip it into third as hard as you can with all your muscle because Mustang, and then you hear this horrible noise and you just crushed your synchro and bent your shift fork. Short shifters are great. I highly recommend them. Not only do they increase the shift feel like 100%, you know exactly where you are, you know exactly what gear you're in and which gear you're about to go to. Unlike the stock shifter, you have no idea where the hell you are sometimes, and the throws are incredibly long. And not only are the throws long, but that just gives you more leverage to break shit inside. What these stops do is prevent you from doing that. So let's go into third gear real quick, and you'll see that the shifter is going to contact that stop. Get a short shifter. It's the best investment you can do, and it's so easy to install. You can even do it yourself. You don't even need to bring it to a mechanic to do it. So that pretty much covers it, guys. I hope that gives you more information and more knowledge about the T5 just by looking at it and being able to tell, get a rough idea, the condition of it. So thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, drop a comment. Really appreciate any of the support you can give me. You guys know the drill. Happy shifting. If you can't find them, grind them. And if you're grinding them, let me know. I'll fix it. Later.